Thank you.
Sweet. You're the best. I kept waiting for that door to actually shut.
Welcome in to DNVR Avalanche's At the Rink podcast. It's been a chaotic day, and we had a lot on our docket to talk with you about today, but we're going to actually keep it a lot simpler than we planned.
We didn't, when we first wrote the rundown for the show, we did not account for a 4-hour delay in our flight getting down. We're at the PHNX offices. I just realized I motioned to nothing over here. Very gracious hosts, really awesome office.
They're so hospitable.
Yeah, it's. I thought you were going to say they're so hostile. I was like, I haven't gotten that vibe at all. No, yeah. So we're a little bit late in the day bringing it to you guys. Obviously, Meghan, we have been together since like 9 a.m. this morning, and I have not asked you how your Christmas was.
It was so good. My parents got 2 new puppies around September timeframe.
Okay,
so
all right.
They're still puppies,
Yeah,
though.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
adorable. I can't get enough of them. It's really hard to leave them when it's all said and done.
Yeah, no, for sure. My sister also had 2 like brand new puppies at Christmas Eve, and they were not my puppies, so they were a little bit less cute because they're like 2 puppies getting into everything. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But yeah, so it's definitely, it's been an interesting week. There's, it's always a weird week for us because the NHL does a full pause. We take the full, weekend off, from work. Thankfully, with the NHL schedule, it lines up that way. We're able to do that. And then, we were originally supposed to have, this was supposed to be out 5-6 hours ago. But we just got here. Craig Morgan from the PHNX Coyotes picked us up from the airport. He's taking us to our destination once we're done here. We just got done with their show. It's been a crazy day. So we pared down this show, like Meghan was saying a little bit. And that's all right.
And
just more for next week.
Exactly. We want to bring more audio, and we have a few things that we want to talk about that we want even more audio for. So
right.
Kicking it off is a topic that encapsulates a part of hockey culture that speaks to why it is nuanced and why it's important to talk about the ways in which the hockey community comes together and supports one another, because I think it's really special for this sport. And I saw even you retweeted this GoFundMe, but Eric Johnson had put it on his own personal Twitter, but former DU captain Rick received some really devastating news about his wife and an aggressive form of cancer. And as a result, this GoFundMe has been created to help financially support this family because he had to make the difficult decision to leave the German team that he was playing for and return home to California to support his wife and her treatments. And as a result, with a family that has young children, that is going to take a huge financial toll. But the way that I've watched the hockey community come together so quickly, because I've been keeping tabs on how this funds raised total just keeps growing and growing, and it's a matter of days, right? I think I checked at the 3-day mark. We're probably around the 4-day mark now. They're at 161,768 of a 200,000 goal. And a few things catch your eye if you go to this GoFundMe page. I'm sure we'll find a way to link it in the description.
Yeah, we definitely will.
If that interests you. But obviously the ties to the DU hockey program are what hook me in and pull me in and how I first discovered of it. But the ties run so much deeper than that, because Eric Johnson, I don't know if he's the type of person who would like that to be broadcasted necessarily, but he was the top donor in this campaign, and it was an incredibly generous amount of money. And his ties to the Rakhshani family start really early in his hockey career from the U.S. development program when they were teammates there. And it just speaks to the way that hockey creates these lifelong friendships and connections, the way that you would see in a family, that really touches my heart. And this is what made me fall in love with the sport in the first place, and why I wanted to work in it in this capacity, where I am able to follow a single team and see its culture up close and connect with players and coaches. And I feel like when we talk about hockey culture, there is a lot of negative connotation there too, but you've seen this side of hockey. And that's why it has such a positive place in your heart. Well,
and so when you first sent this to me earlier in the week as something that you wanted to make sure that you talked about, or we talked about, on this show, I loved it for exactly what you just said, Meghan. Like, we've had to do a couple shows this year talking about, and again, hockey culture, I think, is such an umbrella statement, right? You know, that
it's multidimensional.
There's a lot of nuances to it, but, you know, we've had to have some very not fun hockey culture conversations on the show, on various shows this year. And I think I talked about it on the last one where I was telling you, like, look, this is a hard conversation for me to have because I have a very different relationship with the hockey community. Literally 98% of the people that I like keep in my life are hockey people. My friend that we're staying with here in Arizona, I met through hockey, and I was telling you earlier, I said, he's one of the greatest people I know. And I genuinely believe that is the majority of people that are in this community, because hockey teaches you, it's coached into you from a young age that it's about the team and you have to take care of each other and you have to put other people before yourself. And I truly in my heart believe that is by a wide, vast majority of people that are in this community. And so when you see stuff like this and you see Erik Johnson being, like you said, the top donor, I guarantee he didn't put that screenshot out there. He made the donation, he shared the link, and look, like Erik Johnson doesn't have to do that. He can make an anonymous donation and not whatever, but no, he made the donation, he put his name on it, and then he pushed it out there saying like, hey, let's take care of each other. And these are the stories that I love when we get to talk. Not even a story. This is something that go act on it. Like Meghan said, we'll find a way to link that GoFundMe here. Go act. And 2022 was a rough year for hockey culture, the hockey community. It took a lot of bad hits. This is one of those ones where end the year, the hockey community come together, do something for someone else that's part of this community, because it's a community that means everything to me. And I love when you see stuff like this, because I think you're 100% right, Meghan. This is what attracts people to the sport. And when you start to see, when you get on the inside of this community, you start to see this kind of stuff. This is the stuff that makes you fall in love with it, because I believe that this is what the hockey community is.
And you look at the way that players use their platform to push this out even further successfully, the way that Erik Johnson did. I think it had 19 retweets and 50K impressions, because now we can track that on Twitter.
Right.
That is a huge reach, and that's how it found even more than just Erik Johnson. I was looking in the list of names in there, and there's Matt Nieto, Colin Wilson, Kevin Shattenkirk, Ray Bourque, Tyler Bozak, Stasny. Like, these are names far and wide that have connections to this player in different ways, and they're showing up for him when he needs his hockey family the most. And it's really touching. So I definitely had to give that a nod, because it's 100%. Not the first time I've seen players use their platform to help somebody out. And
again, you mentioned it, I mentioned it, I just want to build on it again. My favorite part of it is, again, you just listed off all those names, and not once have you seen, they don't do it for themselves. Right. They don't,
self-serving.
The hockey community, and this isn't exclusive to the hockey community, but like, to me, again, this is the hockey community. I don't need the recognition. I want to do right by, one of our own. And it's just amazing. And we'll find a way, whether it's across the screen or a link down at the bottom, we'll find a way to link that for sure.
And it all comes back to DU. It always does. No, I'm just kidding. It really doesn't. But I talked at length about the culture of that program. Maybe not even here, but it is an interesting thing, because around that time in my life, I had been around hockey and I'd been around other teams and seen their culture up close. And I had such a good impression of DU's culture throughout my time there, particularly under the leadership of Jim Montgomery. I remember he would sit players sometimes for not doing the right thing. And the players that would get benched weren't guys that I knew had bad character. So they were probably not doing something grievously wrong. But character was important. And I am a huge advocate for the program because of just some of the great people that I met there. And that's why I support it as loudly as I do to this day. And that is why when the World Juniors has one DU player that is also an Avalanche prospect, I have to talk about Sean Behrens. He's had a real rough go of it too. We know that he tried to be in the tournament in winter of last year. He gets COVID. Then he tried to be in the summer tournament. He gets injured immediately into the tournament, basically. One game in, I believe. Maybe two, if
I forgot about the COVID thing right before that. That made it so
he doesn't get to play to completion. And then also USA is upset in the Summer World Juniors. So Sean Behrens is finally getting a crack at it, and he's wearing a letter because at this point he's now been around a lot of these guys, and they just had a terrific game, actually. He had a goal and assist, was named the player of the game. So not only is he demonstrating some leadership there, he's also kind of playing a depth role, which I think is interesting because realistically, Sean Behrens, his path to the NHL is a couple years off. We've talked about that too, but it's still an important player to keep tabs on because the defensive pool has shallowed, and he's at the top of that pool though.
Yeah, so it was funny. We just wrapped up the PHNX Coyotes show that we were on. Obviously, the reason we're here, obviously, is the Avs are in Arizona tomorrow, playing their first game at Mullet Arena. So that's why we're here. We just finished up the PHNX show, and they were listing off all the different Coyotes prospects that are at the World Juniors. They're like, well, who's there for the Avs? And we were like, it's Sean Behrens. That's it. It is funny how you watch the ebbs and flows of these organizations, how you go from lots of guys, the WJCs, when the teams aren't as good, right? You have a lot of high-end prospects, a lot of young guys coming up through the system. And then the Avs turn the page, and now they're cup contenders, and they're in the playoffs, and that number of the WJCs dwindles and dwindles. They win the Stanley Cup, whatever it is, 6 months ago now, and you're down to one guy there. But it's interesting because this isn't like a nobody prospect playing for like Latvia. You know what I mean? This is a legitimate NHL caliber prospect for you, wearing a letter for Team USA. I'm just going to cut right to the chase. Do you think he gets moved?
Honestly,
because he is the last
no,
real
exactly. Like if Barron hadn't happened and Drew Hellison hadn't happened, pulling it back to the Connor Timmins layer, like they have lost a lot. They've moved a lot of defensive prospects out, and it just feels like they can't afford to.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that, but I also thought Justin Barron was untouchable.
Right,
so
right.
Really.
Yeah. I think I'm with you. I'd be surprised if they traded him, but I also think it's one of those things where if that gets a Bo Horvat deal over the finish line, I wouldn't bet against it necessarily, but it's good to see him there. It's good to see that he finally got there. And again, like, it is a nice little reminder that, hey, the Avs are the defending Stanley Cup champions, but you still have, again, one of the top defenders for Team USA, one of the tournament favorites in your prospect pipeline that we can maybe sometimes forget because we don't get to see him as often. We don't get to see NCAA players at all.
And I know that scouts, this is literally their job, but I wonder how much national recognition he has,
right,
as an asset. And I also, it made me think of, we haven't talked about it here, but the loss of Daniil Zhiravalov to that defensive depth. Like, I don't know that he was an NHL caliber player and that was his upside. Like, I'm not sure I was confident to say that, but we won't know. And that's just another piece of their defensive prospects that has been chipped away, that it is really whittled down to just Barons. And that is another reason why I think it would be very surprising. Yeah, but hopefully he stays just quiet enough in the NCAA that he's not drawing too much national attention. But that's just a selfish want at that point.
Well, he was player of the game today, so he's off to a bad start.
He's off to a bad start.
Of staying
Who's
quiet.
really watching the WJCs anyways?
No, but good start to the tournament for him. Again, after missing the first two for super unlucky reasons, it's nice to see him get off to a good start. Again, as a nice little reminder that even though they are the defending Stanley Cup champs, they've had to move a lot of assets out. You still got one in the pipeline.
Absolutely. And looking at that pipeline, I know this is probably going to be a conversation we circle back to at different points, but it is the budding success of the Colorado Eagles. They're top of their division right now, 6-3-1 in their last 10 games. And they have also been depleted by injury and or this call-up rotation that the Avs have been asking of them for reinforcements because of their own injuries. And I did a little bit of written content to supplement this and list every player that has missed time from the Eagles lineup in either being called up, injury, or illness. And it is kind of shocking.
Yeah.
And as a result, they've also brought in new players. They have Cedric Paré on a PTO, and they have David Ferrance, who they acquired through a trade for future considerations. And they are dealing with that 5 ECHL call-ups at one point. Like, this is also, Cronin is not dealing with a full deck here. And it has been a huge accomplishment to win and string together wins the way that he has, being as depleted as he has.
So, Meghan, we cover the Avs, right? We cover the Colorado Avalanche. You go up to Loveland and see the Eagles, way, way more than I do. But for the most part, like it's the DNVR Avalanche pod and all that stuff. So we can sometimes forget that for every call up, every injury to the Avs where you have to make a call up, the knee jerk is like, oh, that sucks for the Avs. That also means the Eagles lose a guy to the call up. We look at it as, wow, what a positive for that guy to get called up. The Eagles look at it. You were talking about Jacob McDonald last week. You're like, the Avs are going to play him 2 minutes. The Eagles could use Jacob McDonald. And
they don't have a captain.
Right. And you forget that that's how it works sometimes, that when the Avs go through these injury struggles and are really depleted, that means that the Eagles are equally as depleted because they are having to furnish an Avalanche lineup essentially. And I think this and the success that they've had early in this season, look, the Avs are 6 points back with 3 games in hand of first in the division. I think it's pretty safe to say, despite the injuries, the Avs have had a pretty successful start to the season as well, right? And I think when you bump these two things up next to each other, it really is a testament to the organization. And I'm sure people are sick of hearing me talk about him, but this is another feather in the cap of Jared Bednar and the system that he runs and the relationship that him and Greg Cronin have. He says that him and Greg Cronin, the head coach of the Colorado Eagles, talk regularly about who's down there, what the systems look like, who's struggling where, what roles do they have guys playing in. And this to me is this is what organizational excellence looks like. We have heard other teams, other clubs, other organizations talk about it for years. There's been examples, and obviously this first one has been blemished a bit now in hindsight, but the Blackhawks there for whatever it was, 8 years, 3 cups in 6 years, but that really 8-year window where it was like, they just keep finding guys. They call guys up from the AHL and they just fit. The Pittsburgh Penguins, right? Obviously the Tampa Bay Lightning. These are teams that people talk about in terms of, like I said, organizational excellence. Players come in and they fit. Players get called up and they fit. That is what you are seeing now with the Avalanche, and it extends down to the Eagles, where the guys that are coming into that system, whether it be through the ECHL or whatever, they are getting integrated right away. They understand what's happening. They understand the expectation. And because that's being set at the Eagles level, by the time they get to the NHL, they understand the expectations. They understand, what the work ethic looks like and all of that. And this is just why when you really dig into it, it is, but it really isn't surprising that both the Avs and the Eagles have gotten off to a good start despite these injuries that all, like we were saying, come from the top. This to me is just another example of this is the Jared Bednar, Greg Cronin tree. Play the right way, stay committed to your systems, and you can get by without your highest end players.
And Cronin talked about this, and this is another example of how these organizations complement each other. But as the Colorado Eagles, the AHL team coached by Greg Cronin, they have historically started off seasons kind of slower, a little bit rockier, like it trends in this way, but they don't always start off the season super hot. And Cronin explained that he's well aware of that. It is actually because there's a lot of teaching and learning that happens, especially with any new personnel that gets brought in, especially in the AHL. There is a lot of turnover season to season, so that's very common to have new personnel each year. And in that, he's teaching them, like we talk about with Jared Bednar, the buy-in, the expectations and the way that they're expected to play. And you really begin to see it click for the players when they begin to string together wins. And it's a process that takes a little bit of time. And we saw this even with the Avalanche, who don't necessarily have a ton of new personnel going into this season. There was a period at the beginning of the season for the Avs that they also had to establish a buy-in. And with all of the new personnel circling in and out of the Avs lineup, that has also been something that's happened periodically throughout the course of the season. And Jared Bednar has been described as a teacher, someone that is able to teach these players things as needed. But we'll play a clip in just a second about the role that the NHL plays compared to the AHL and why it is so important for these two to be on the same page.
Yeah, it's, and I don't remember if this is in the clip that you're wanting to play or that we're gonna hear in just a second. And I apologize if it is, but it was something that I thought was, when Jared Bednar talked about this, what I thought was so striking was the The American League is for development. We are not in the business of developing players at the NHL level. I thought that was such an interesting call out to actually hear a coach say, right? Because we talk about it like, oh, why aren't you playing this young guy? Why aren't you getting this kid some reps? Or why aren't they playing enough minutes? And Jared Bednar's philosophy is that's what the AHL is for, so that you're ready when you come here. And again, making sure, just building on your point of like that communication between Bednar and Cronin is so key, so that he knows they're being developed the way we want. So by the time they get here, we don't have to develop them.
And I think the important distinction is that while Bednar can teach, the level of attention he can pay towards development just isn't there at the NHL level. It's not that he's not willing to do this or incapable of doing this. It's just the attention of detail that they can provide at the AHL level is surgical.
Right. And Megan, like you and I have talked about it. Again, I'm not going to bring up Martin Kaut. I refuse to talk about Martin Kaut.
Every single one of our pods will be about him if we do this.
So I'm not going to bring him up, but you know, pick another guy who we've said, wow, I wish they would get more minutes later. Why are they playing 4 minutes? Why are they getting 5 minutes, you know, over the course of an entire game? Like you said, he doesn't have the time for that. He doesn't have time to let you go out and learn from your mistakes. Mistakes are goals against. This team, especially right now with the injuries, they don't have time for goals against. And, you know, damn it, I'm going to do it. You were talking to me about how Martin Kaut wasn't a black ace in the playoffs last year. And it was easy for people to look at that and go, well, why wouldn't your most tenured prospect be a black ace? And that's Jared Bednar saying, I don't have time to worry if he's going to make the right play or not, if he's going to make the right read, if he's going to engage physically on the wall. Like, I don't, if we give up a goal in the playoffs, we may not get that goal back. And it was interesting to hear Jared Bednar, you know, obviously in far fewer words, but basically say exactly what you said. I don't have time to develop the guys. I'm trying to win hockey games.
I think that he's been as responsible as any forward we've had over the last few games since he's been up. I like his game a lot. He's way quicker now. He's lighter than he was in training camp, more of a playing weight where he came in at the end of last year where we really liked him. And he's done a nice job both sides of the puck here since he's been back. You know, I think you have to be able to move on from mistakes in a game. But like points are really important. So I think if he's making too many of them, then we'll change your plan. You know, that's just where we are. We're in the winning business now. We're not not that we're not trying to develop players, but we're not in a spot where we're going to keep guys up on the roster just to give them experience or develop them for the future. That's what the American League's for the most part. But if guys are learning from their mistakes and moving on and they're still trusted players, then they're going to stay here and play.
We're in the business of winning. Mm-hmm. That is what it comes down to. It's the stage the Avs are at. They are looking to be contenders yet again. They're not in the stage where they can afford to just run and gun prospects. You let them eat NHL minutes. That is something that just needs to happen at the American League at this point in time. And again, it's not a reflection of Jared Bednar being incapable of this. They need to win games, especially because they are trying to bank some points because of the injuries that they've experienced and the losses that they've taken. They can't afford to lose games.
Well, not even go as far as say, not only is Jared Bednar not capable, I think Jared Bednar is a fantastic player developer. His 100%. Entire career, I mean, he spent decades in the minors preparing players for that next level. But you're right. It's not an inability to do it. And that may honestly go down as like my favorite quote of the year. We're in the business of winning. And again, it's hard to keep that in mind sometimes when you're a fan. That, you know, you want to see your favorite players. You want to see these prospects that you know are coming. You want to see them get into the game. But that's just not what this is about. At least not right now.
No.
Right? We're here in Arizona at the PHNX Coyotes office. That's what the Coyotes are in the business for. But even then, we were just talking to Craig, and he was saying, right, to an extent,
we're talking about Timmins.
Right.
That what they were not able to do with him here, they just weren't in a position even for that.
Right, and they wanted to send him down to get him some more reps, to be NHL ready, and they were afraid that they were going to lose him on waivers, so they make a trade. But you're right, Connor Timmins, that's a guy that we think of that. We were talking about him in the airport this morning on our 4-hour delay. that, we see that guy as having legitimate top 4 upside. And they thought he needed some more time in the AHL, and that's fine. That's what that league is there for. The AHL is not, a death sentence, or it doesn't have to be for prospects. And I love that the Avs embrace that mentality. And I think that's why you've seen guys like Jean-Luc Foudy come into the NHL lineup and be able to hit the ground running, because they understand the expectations. They know what to expect when they get there in terms of what Jared Bednar will be asking them, what role within the system they're going to be able to play. And again, I just go back to, everyone talks about it with the Pittsburgh Penguins now for the last 15 years. Seems like every guy that shows up there turns into an all-star, and the Avs are having a little bit of that same kind of streak right now. And I think it's a lot of what you wanted, that you wrote a little bit about, of just the marriage between the Avs and the Eagles right now. Among the best in the NHL in terms of the NHL and AHL organizations, in my opinion.
It makes me think of two things. One is that I was talking with Andrew Cogliano about work ethic at one point, and he brought up how Bednar can teach. There's not an unwillingness, and what he teaches too is often his expectations, his needs from players, and it's up to the players to execute. And depending on how immediately they can is sort of what determines if they're able to stay in an NHL lineup or need to go to the American League to work on it. And so I really want to emphasize that Bednar is also a teacher. It is just of a different kind. He's able to teach and tell expectation. Like, he has this 30-minute conversation with Martin Kaut when he gets reassigned.
Yep.
He's not unwilling to talk to the players and tell them what is needed of them. It's just the mistakes. The costly mistakes on an NHL stage are what he can't afford to allow. And that's sort of the key difference. And that's where then the way that Greg Cronin executes systems in Loveland so similarly to the Colorado Avalanche prepares these players, sets them up for success to the best of his ability because they're going to be so similar. According to Charles Hudon, they're 90 to 95% similar in how they execute. And even, I wished I had the audio left from this Kalberg interview, but he talked about how similar they are. He reiterated that they were in fact similar. Some of the key differences are the speed and transition up through the neutral zone, which we see is a strength of the Colorado Avalanche that might just be stronger for the Avalanche than it is in execution for the Eagles. But Brad Hunt, kind of similar. It just is the defensive play that they expect of the forwards that we also see has brought the Avalanche success. But these are kind of small differences that aren't going to be absent in how the Eagles play either. And it's what they're doing to set these players up for success when they do get called up.
Well, and it's and I'll even take it a step further when we're talking about Jared Bednar and like you were saying, the conversations he has with some of these players, or whether it be new players coming into the lineup or the organization, whatever. I actually think he's a great communicator, and I think he gets his points across very clearly. And I think where this marriage works at its best between him and Greg Cronin is, hey, player X, I'm going to give you 30 minutes of exactly what I'm looking for out of you. Then I'm going to send you up the road to Greg Cronin, and he's going to teach you how to do it. So you're going to understand what I want, and then he's going to show you how to do it. And I think him and Cronin understand that relationship. Jared Bednar tees it up. Greg Cronin's the one that actually hits it. And that's how that's how this relationship has kind of worked. But I think it's that Jared Bednar is such a good communicator is part of the reason why you're able to see those guys. Alex Newhook last year got his kind of marching orders from Jared Bednar, went down to the American League, said, I understand exactly what I have to do, what I need to stick in the NHL. He came back. He's not going back to the Eagles. You know what I mean? Exactly.
And Cronin, several times now with different players, has brought up the point that here in the American League, they're going to get top line minutes. They're going to get 20-minute nights. And he will also add, but they still need to have these fourth line pro habits, even if they're getting top line minutes. That's specific to Kaut. But honestly, it's true of other players like Sampo Ranta who've been reassigned back to the Eagles that they're just going to get more reps in here. And Cronin always goes back to the reps when it comes to learning. It is how good habits get built, and it comes through reps, and they're not going to get those reps at the NHL at this 100%. Time, like Jacob McDonald getting 2-minute nights, very different conversation, but there is a very short runway that is being allowed for a lot of these players at the NHL level that they're just not going to get those reps. They won't build good habits, and the only way they can be an NHL regular is if they do that at the American League first. Yeah. No, 100%. I think you nailed it, and it's fun to see a nice cohesive relationship between the Avs and the Eagles. I feel like for a long time the Avs struggled, the AHL team struggled, and that's why you weren't churning out a lot of good prospects. I feel like that's flipped a bit. Absolutely. Well, we should probably begin winding it down.
Yes.
It is late. We haven't had dinner, but we're going to throw some audio in post-production, so I'm not sure how this is going to look for you guys, but I think it's going to be good.
Big shout out to Yah here because he's making all this happen from thousands of miles from us, or hundreds of miles. I don't know how far we are. I have no idea.
No,
I'm assuming it's thousands.
I don't know how.
Right? It's miles. It's multiple miles. How about that? But no, Yah here will always make us look and sound good and all that stuff. Now I just have to look it up. This is great to listen to. 864 miles. So
864
just shy of
miles
1,000.
away. And
Yep.
you guys are in our hearts always. And that is why we couldn't go a Monday without doing an At the Rink pod for you guys, even though it might be a little different from expectation. I'm Meghan Angley. This is Jesse Montano. And this is DNVR's Avalanche At the Rink podcast. We'll see you next Monday.